Hello and good day, everyone. Uh, Happy New Year. I hope you had some good break. If you took a break for the vacations, during this time of the year, even if it's a little bit different depending on your depending on your time zone. So that's going to be some interesting year for this year. We have lots to unwrap for the Uno platform, and yeah, it's going to be a quite interesting year. We have lots happening with WinUI 3 that's going to be released sometime during the year. So it's .NET 6 and other features that are going to be released. So it's going to be a fun year. So buckle up. It's gonna be a fun ride. So today I'm gonna be discussing a few things around the use of features coming from the Uno platform. And there was a question on Discord. There was someone asking about the use of state triggers. And state triggers is something that is quite interesting because it allows to change the state of some visual elements, to be updated when let's say a specific condition changes. So for instance, if we take a look at the adaptive trigger, so we're in the Uno playground. And the playground is something that allows to test the applications directly, and you can test your XAML and have an idea of the actual results running directly inside the browsers. You can see many of the samples there that give you, samples of many features that Uno platform supports on WebAssembly. And for this, it allows to give some interesting insights into testing the features that are available. So the state triggers is one of the features that is of interest. And in this particular sample, the idea is that we have a stack panel here, for which the orientation is vertical by default. And if the window size is so the full window size is bigger than 720 pixels, then the orientation of the panel will change from vertical to horizontal. So that's the kind of things that you can do with this. So I don't know if my window is big enough. Oh, so there you go. So if the window is small enough that it gets in that condition, and then if it gets bigger, you can see that it changes down to being an horizontal alignment here. But there's an interesting feature where you can actually change that adaptive trigger and use something different. So you can use a class that's called a state trigger, and it has a property that's called isEnabled. And if you set it to true or false based on, so you set it to true or false, then it will enable the orientation and set the proper value. So if I set it to true here, I can set it to false, and it should be. Let me check if it does what it's supposed to be doing. It's not doing what it's doing because it's probably not the right property. So let's see. It's probably not isEnabled. It's probably isActive. Let me see. Is it isActive? Probably not. Let me see if it's the right one. So let's take a look at the documentation here. I have the documentation for state triggers. So let's take a look at the documentation for state trigger here. So state trigger has some properties and has an isActive property here, and it should be. You can set the isActive property directly inside of the property here, and in theory, changing that should allow for that trigger to be enabled properly. So maybe there's an issue here. We can take a look at that one, and it's probably a regression that we added recently. So probably something that will need to be taken a look at. But the interesting part is that we can data bind that, and let's take a look at that property. So if I bind that to the property that's called enabled, and I go to my data here and I do something like enabled, and I say true, then I can see that, so there's definitely something that didn't work when setting the value directly here. But if I change the value from here, so by the data context, so I set the data context at the top level using the data tab here, and the value for enable flows through to the state trigger here, and then it happens to be data binding directly to that property here. So if I change this from true to false, you can see that once I change the value to true, I get to the alignment, the orientation being horizontal, because when that state trigger is active, then it will set the setter here of my panel orientation to horizontal. And if it gets to false, then it goes back to, or something else, it goes back to being a vertical stack panel. So that's the kind of things that we can do, and we can do many things, like let's say changing the background color. So let's say for that one I say transparent from here, and if I add a new setter here to let's say the background here to something else, let's say background here, and I say that it's red, for instance. So when the property here becomes true, it will change the color as well of the stack panel to be a red, because I said that when that visual state becomes true, then both setters will happen to be true as well. So we be executed and set the right color when we change that content. So that's one of the things that is also available by using the state trigger. Another thing that has been pointed over by the XAML llama is the XAML behavior. XAML behavior NuGet package, and that NuGet package is doing something that is quite similar, and you can do things like event triggers and on a specific event, then change a specific property to another value. So that's another way to alter the properties of an object based on something else, all defined in C#, all defined in XAML. Sorry. So that's one of the other libraries that you can use to change the properties of a control. So I'll make a link of this. So when you take a look at the stream, if you go to playground.platform.uno, and then you type in exactly that that specific number that you see on the screen, you'll be able to check that and test it by yourself. So that's that. So that's one of the features that you can take a look when using the Uno platform, except for the little issue that we have here, which is the default value of the state trigger, which is probably not read properly. So we'll probably open an issue for that one, so we can fix it properly in Uno. So I was about to take a look at another issue today. It's Roblu that opened that issue. It's a regular contributor of the Uno platform, and he mentioned that the control that's called the property on the pivot control, which is called a pivot that selects the item. When you set that in code, it doesn't update the UI properly automatically. So, fair enough. There's probably something that doesn't work right on that control. So we're going to be taking a look at what happens and why that happens that way. So there's no repro specific for that one as an application that's been developed and provided as a sample. So we're going to create a new one. So let's go over to the creation of a new project template, and let's take a look at this. So we're going to take I don't know if in this instance of Visual Studio I do have the Uno templates installed. If not, I'll do that because I'm testing I'm doing some quick testing of the templates directly on my machine, so I do know if it works properly, but it looks like the templates are not there. Oh, there they are. Okay, so we have that one, and so there's one thing that we probably should be taking a look at as well, is the fact that we have two sets of templates. And it's actually because of a new feature that's in preview in Visual Studio, which takes the .NET templates and populates those templates and populates that list with that set of templates. And the problem is that if you have the Visual Studio V6 installed and you have the .NET new templates installed as well, then you're going to have two sets of templates. So that's not good. And for now, there's no clear documentation about how to make sure that templates won't appear twice if you happen as a template provider to provide both templates. And we're talking to Microsoft people to understand how we can do that. So for now, probably going to be adding a tag that says .NET New so that we can determine that it's happening there properly. Actually, you can probably take a look at that while the application's building. So let's call this pivot selected item. So those tags are inside the template. So if we take a look at the solution structure of Uno, and if we go to the solution template, and then we go to Uno solution template here, we'll be able to see that there's well, it's actually that one. So the Uno project templates, so .NET, so we can actually change that one. And the Uno app has a folder that's called .template.config. And inside there's multiple files. And there's the template.json that provides a set of classifications here that tell if what's going to be appearing when you create a new project. So for here, we probably should be adding something like .NET New so that we can, in the meantime, discriminate between the ones that are provided by the Visual Studio templates and the one that comes from Visual Studio, the one that comes from .NET New. So we can change it here. And probably going to be changing that to in the other templates because there are actually quite many others. So we have one for Prism, one from WinUI, one from Uno Library Cross Runtime Library, and the Xamarin Forms one. Xamarin Forms one, by the way, is actually quite used quite a bit lately. We have quite a few people asking about that. And if you have any question, and if you're on the stream and you have any question about that specific one for the Xamarin Forms WASM. I heard people asking for the .NET 5 support for WebAssembly, for Xamarin Forms WebAssembly. So if you have any requests about that, please open an issue so we can take a look. But .NET 5 for Xamarin Forms is something that we are going to be looking at. Okay, so my application's been created, so I don't want to update that for now. It's a mix between versions. So this is Visual Studio Preview 16.9 preview 2. I hope preview 3 is going to be released soon because it has some important fixes for Uno. So let's do this. Let's create a pivot control and see what happens. So we're going to create one and run on GTK for now. And let's go to our shared project and let's do that. So we're still having the same issue. So that's the issue that I'm talking about. Creating a new template just breaks the designer. So 16.9 preview 3 is going to help immensely for that one. So you can close the project and open it back again. And then it should be lots better. There you go. So I'll be going to UWP, and instead of migrate, I'm going to be adding a pivot control. So if I take a look at the control itself, let's actually take that one specifically. So there's the pivot item, and there's probably a content property, and let's say it's so other pivot, and there's a title if I remember correctly, or header. There you go. So other, and let's take another one that's called, let's take the same name. Licenses content. So that's other content. Other content and licenses content. Let's change that one a bit as well. Okay, so let's run that one and see what happens. So it should work properly. So it's building. So I'm taking this key ahead most of the time when debugging things by default, just for the performance of the execution and build. It starts fast and runs fast. Okay, so there it is. I have my my pivot control that displays the proper content. So now let's make it fail with the content of the content of this. So that's why we generally ask for an actual repro, because this is something that I must add somewhere. My assumption is that it's from the constructor, but it could be from somewhere else. So let's try it from the constructor and see what happens. But it could be in loaded, it could be in another button or something else. So since the licenses pivot item is the second one, we would assume that setting this would do something right. So let's try it that way. Does it select the second one? It does not. So okay, so that's one good hint. It should select the second one, and it does not. So let's see if we can step into and see what happens there. See if it does the right thing. Okay. So I have so this is the get for the selected item. That's the get for the licenses pivot item, and then we probably going to be downloading. So this is SourceLink, pretty amazing tech. It allows to get the pivot. It allows to get the source of the Uno platform version binaries that I'm running on by getting them directly from GitHub. So this is pretty nice. So I'm just going to let it download, and now I end up directly into the actual source code that I'm running, which is pretty nice. So what I want to know is what that property change selected property item does. So I'm probably going to be putting a breakpoint into the property itself and the property change callback, and see where we go, where we're going. So let's go dive into selected item changed. So it downloaded another file again. So this is dependency property change callback. That one's not particularly interesting. So now we're inside of nothing. So we're just out of dependency property change, so it's not useful. So the fact that it downloaded everything is probably not the right thing. Where are we? Synchronize pivot item. Okay. So we're inside of onApply template. So see, that means that the selected item is probably changed afterwards, which is probably not right. So let's try something. Let's say that we go into loaded instead. And then we do instead of the loaded event, because it looks like it's linked to the sequence of events, and with the way the selected item is managed internally inside of the pivot control. So let's see if we, instead of doing it inside of the constructor, we do that instead inside of the loaded event. That is something that we're actually working on with the members, some members of the team, adjusting everything that goes along with the loaded events, apply templates, loading, unloaded, and things like that. So that the ordering that Uno is providing is not the exact, is not the right one when compared to what WinUI is doing. So we're investing significantly inside of Uno to make sure that the behavior is getting closer to what WinUI is doing. And you know, there's a good reason for that, is because we started Uno a long time ago without having access to the WinUI source. So we kind of guessed the behavior, and we guessed some of the behavior the wrong way without, you know, or because we didn't know what the kind of behavior we would run into when implementing most of the features that we have today in Uno. So that's why we're looking at it at this point. So it still doesn't work. So that's that's very interesting. So the fact that we're changing the pivot, the selected item after the fact doesn't change anything. So let's see. If we go back here and we want it to change the content. So let's dive into this one. So this is not interesting. This is not interesting as well because it's generated code. So we go to the set value of the selected item property, and we're going to go to this one. Okay, let's dive into unselected item property changed. Okay, so we have old value and new value. And so the old value is probably the one that we don't want. If we take a look at content, so system type is not supported by this context. So probably something that is a bit too complex for the debugger for some reason. Oh, that's probably because of the PDBs are not the right ones. Oh, that's interesting. So that's something that we probably should be looking at. So we're going to be rebuilding a new version of Uno so that it gets updated properly. Hi Navio. So you came and you cannot select from code navigation view item. The page is changed, but the selection indicator is not. There's something that we're working on currently. It would also be helpful to know if you're using the new version of the navigation view or the previous version. So when I'm saying new and previous, we in Uno 3.4 we ported over the newer versions of the Microsoft.ui.xaml, the controls.navigation view. And that version of the control is more fully fledged. So it would be interesting to know which version of the control you're mentioning. Okay, so removed item, there's one, added item, there's another one. And it says invoke selection changed. And it just raises selection change. So unselected item change partial doesn't do anything, likely, because we jumped over. Let's try it again. So we run that over. Okay, so that's not useful anymore. So we're there, and now we're selecting the new item. So we jump over. So the reason we're jumping over is that property, that element here is not supposed to, it's supposed to be doing something. So when we set the new selected item, it's supposed to be doing something. And my assumption would be that method should do something, and it doesn't do anything. So that's probably one of the reasons why the item is not getting updated while it's set during the code behind. So that's an interesting part. So that's probably one good reason for which there's nothing that's happening. And invoke selection change is actually doing this, and selection change is pretty much raising the event. So we're not doing anything with the selected item change. We're not doing anything with it. So that's one good reason for that to not work properly. So let's take a look at what Uno is saying for this. So the first thing that we can do is go to the unit tests. So we want to be able to validate that the behavior of that control is the right one when using unit testing instead of just running the full application. So let's go to this. So we're going to change the cross-targeting override to set it to the net461 target, which is the one that we use for unit tests. And then we're going to open the solution filter specifically for unit tests here. So let's save the template JSON, which is modified a bit before. So you were using Uno RX, but you updated Uno to the latest version. So that control, the navigation control, is something that you need to change explicitly. It's actually two sets of control. It's two different controls. I'm sorry. So there's one in the Microsoft.ui.xaml, and there's another one in the Windows.ui.xaml. So you have to choose between one and the other. So if you didn't do anything, it's likely that you're using the Windows one, and you may want to use the Microsoft one. So there it is. So let's see if I do have a test per pivot. I do have tests for pivots here. So so you can see here that the solution is actually pretty small because I opened it with the filter, and the filter says that I have 13 projects over 86 that are in the full solution. So that's something that we're taking a look. So the reason, the way it's structured is that we use the name of the control and the namespace of the control as a folder, and then you can go find a specific test. So that one is going to be a given pivot. So we have here a simple test that validates something not particularly useful, but it's it's validating the fact that the control is having the proper size when empty. Okay, so that's one thing to test. So let's create another test. So when we're using selected item, we do when set selected item. So we are having our system under test, and let's add a few items there. So that's not items, it's going to be an recall. So that there's something with Visual Studio, the latest ones, where IntelliSense just happens to not work for the first 30 seconds to a minute, and then it happens to work afterwards. So it doesn't matter how big the solution is, but it just doesn't show up. So that's something to know with 16.9. So let's say, I don't know which one that is, probably items. Let's see. Yeah, that's items. Okay, items collection. So let's add a new pivot item. We're going to do pretty much the same thing as we had before. So we're going to say that content is pivot 1, and the other one is pivot 2. And then what we're going to do here is force the loaded here. So we're not running the full application, so we have to simulate the calls that the framework would do to the control so that it behaves properly. So we're forcing it to be loaded and go into a loaded state. So now what I'm going to do is do something like this. Selected item, and I'm going to say that selected item is actually the second one. So let's take the second one. So now to validate that the control is actually displaying the second pivot item, there's probably a way that we can do that. And it's probably something that has to do with go deep inside of the way the control works. So let's actually try to run this and see what happens. So when we're running tests like this, the controls are simulated, but not all of it is simulated. So that means that the internal structures of the pivot control is created properly, and that means that the items that are inside of the pivot template, and we can probably go and check that one. There's a pivot template here. There's a pivot control, and there's also a pivot template that we can go and take a look at the in the styles here. So there it is. So let's try to find the pivot control. Okay. Default style for pivot control. So that one is named for some reason. Let's try to find another control. Okay, Visual Studio is not liking that much what I'm doing, but you know, that happens with very large XAML files. So that's the reason what you're seeing that here. So let's see what happens afterwards. If it still fails, we're probably going to open the file in a different environment so that it doesn't fail anymore. Okay, doesn't like it that much. So let's open it in a different environment. It's probably going to unblock itself at some point. Okay, so I'm opening the same thing, and I'm going to be browsing the files directly through the browser and not the Solution Explorer. So we go to uno.ui, UI XAML, and then styles, then generic.xaml. Let's go find the pivot as well again. I probably should be searching for target type pivots, probably going to be easier. Okay, so we have the XAML default pivot style. So that means that when we're creating the control, it's materializing all this, and it's actually quite big control, but there's a set of controls inside, like so the panel, which is the top level panel, and then you have the top level pivot layout panel, and then inside you have lots of other things like a header clipper, left header presenter, and things like that. And what we want to find is the one that actually displays the inner content. So the one that we want to look at is going to be the items presenter here, which is the pivot item presenter. So I'm going to see how we can test that one properly and validate that it's probably that one. So one thing that we can test indirectly, so it's probably too complex to take a look at because there's transforms and things like that, so it's not going to be easy to validate. What we can validate in the meantime to understand the behavior of that control is to check for indirect properties. So another one that we can test is in the pivot, we can probably go check for, let's say, the selected index. So when we set the selected item, it should change the selected index. So if that property is not changed properly, that means that the control is not behaving properly. So, but Visual Studio is still not liking it that much for some reason. So we're going to let it finish. We could probably take a look at that code that comes from the others. So let's say there's probably a selected index. Okay, selected index. So that's the code that's coming from. That's the code that's coming from the Visual Studio source. The Uno source, but using source using the source, the generated PDBs, so symbols that are built into the NuGet package. So SourceLink is providing this. So when you go here, you can see that unselected index change is doing something, and we can see here that we're actually calling something that's called synchronize selected item. So this is interesting because that means that it should be doing something properly when we change the selected item also, but it doesn't do it. It does it only for selected index, but not for selected item. So let's take a look. If we do this instead of selected item, let's go for selected index. If we go to selected index and set it to 1 instead of the rest and run the application, is our sample application doing something differently? Yes, it does. Okay, so selected index works, but not selected item. So that means that we have to do something differently there for the content to be updated properly. So it probably looks like that the unselected item change partial is not doing what it's supposed to be doing. So let's, I think the build has moved forward, so it's probably, yep. So big XAML files with generic.xaml is not liking it that much, so you have probably to open it once and then let it finish. So it's probably going to be finishing soon. It's at the fluent theming. You're wondering, hey Sinclair, Jeremy. So you have, yes, it could be an equality feature. Probably. Well, actually, it would be an equality problem if the code was called. It's actually not called at all. So it's probably something else that needs to be adjusted. So if we take a look at the, we had the selected item change somewhere below, remember correctly. Selected item changed. Selected index changed. You have it here. So this is called an index change and not an item change. So if we take a look at the actual reference for that one, we're calling it here. So we have selected item, selected property change here. So we're in pivot, but we're not doing anything. So curiously, it looks like it's some piece of code that was moved from one side to the other, but was not raised properly. So it feels like that piece of code is not supposed to be there, unless it's called on another platform. So let's wait for Visual Studio to wake up and run the tests. Oh, I started it with the debug, so that's why. Okay, so selected item is set to something, I guess. SUT and selected item. Selected item is probably somewhere around here. Selected item is set to something, but selected index is still 0. So that's where our issue lies. So we can repro the issue when running in unit tests, which is pretty good. So the assertion could be r equal 1 and SUT.selected index should be 1. It's not supposed to be 0. So we're probably gonna add another test that validates the other way around. So we'd set the selected index and then it goes back to selected items to see if we have the proper value. So let's go back to pivot here, and selected item property change is doing things so that the selection is raised, but it's not doing the right thing here. It's not calling the right thing. So let's do this. Let's say if we do, if we go to the selected item, so let's remove this. So let's collapse that. Let's just call this one for now and see if that fixes it a little bit. So let's replace this and remove this. It's probably not used, but we're going to take a look. Let's see. Let's take a look at the other files that are next to it. So let's say pivot. There's no pivot for the other targets. There's pivot.property. So it's probably something that was never used. Anyways, so let's take a look here and rerun the test and see if it does better. So we're basically calling synchronized selected items. So this one is basically rebuilding the list and determining what the selected index is based on the something here. Okay, synchronized selected, it's doing it the other way around. So probably should be building the item. So this is probably not good. So the change that I made is not doing anything. So this is, we need something that synchronizes the selected index based on the selected item. So probably going to be having to change that. Probably an index of somewhere should do the trick. Let's see. It should still fail. I'm wondering if I did something that prevents Visual Studio from running a bit faster. It's supposed to be a bit faster than that on my machine. So I'm wondering if Preview 2 is impacting the runtime of my machine. Yeah, it's quite big. Okay, that could be a problem. 7 gigs for this is probably too large. Yeah, that's probably the reason. Probably close my Visual Studio and start again after that so that it goes a bit faster. Yeah, there could be tons of MS build processes. Could be just, sometimes it's just the what's that called? The Roslyn background processes. So the out of proc, all the MS build stuff, but also so there's the Uno source generation that takes a bit of memory, but that's not just it. There's the VBCS compiler that takes a bit of process memory. There's a few other things that are quite large that are bumping up the memory and slowing down everything else. So it takes time to get back to that one where it shouldn't. But actually, I do know that it's not going to work, so let's not continue that one. So what we need is to determine the position of the added item, so the new value. So we don't need, we just need the new value. So we need to understand what, we need to find out what's the value, what's the new index based on the value that's here. So let's see. We'll probably do some index up here. That's probably it. So same thing here. Visual Studio is lagging a bit. So okay, let's close it and start again because it's taking way too long. So I was on this one. Hopefully it's going to go lots faster. Okay, so we're on the right one. No, we're not on the right one. I think I opened another one. I think it's that one. So I have three work trees of the same repo. It's a Git feature that allows to have the same Git clone, the same Git repo, and then have multiple checkouts of the same repo. So you can you don't need to have multiple checkouts of that, and it's easier for branch management and manipulation of that. So it's quite an interesting feature if you're wondering. It's a Git Worktree. So it's basically a folder with a very small a folder that links to another repository in another folder, but you basically don't have to clone the full thing to get the repo. So it allows you to check out multiple branches of the same repository without having to clone everything multiple times. That's quite helpful. Okay, so let's open the same filter this time. Yeah, they share the same .git folder, which is, it's pretty helpful. The only thing that's annoying of this is that you cannot check out the same branch multiple times. So if you have multiple folders, multiple work trees, you have to remember where you checked out one specific branch. So that's the only thing that's annoying. It makes sense why it doesn't work, but it's something that you need to remember. Okay. So I was inside of the selected item. So if I'm here, now I have the items property. Is there an index of? Yes, there's an index of. So I'm going to be doing something like this. I'm going to take a look at, I'm going to search for the index of the new value. And if it's different from -1, let's take a look at this right now. We're going to do the non-happy path afterwards. And we're going to say selected index is, oop, missed it. So let's make a variable of that one. Item index. And let's do this. And let's see if that works. If that's better. Should be. So Visual Studio is not liking it that much. So that's still new to 16.9. I hope that's going to get fixed as well. Okay, so let's try to build that again. I have to open the Test Explorer. If you want to check out, you have to detach the head. Yeah, yeah, that's something that is possible to detach a head, but I'm not playing with that too much because detaching heads is after that you have to manipulate the git hash explicitly. So yeah, no, no, thank you. Okay, so Visual Studio is still building something. You have to wait for this to be available. So let's actually build the test binary explicitly so that we gain a bit of time. So that's where it starts turning. So we see here that it's thinking and trying to find the tests that are available in the current solution. And when the two icons at the top become green, then that's where you can actually run the tests. So that's that. So that specific control, the pivot control, is something that we've implemented specifically for Uno. This is not something that's been ported from Windows. It's probably something that we're going to fix at some point and import the source code that's coming from WinUI and have the exact same behavior that's coming from Windows, so we don't have that specific set of features that may not work. Having the same code is something that we strive to get a better stability and predictability in terms of behavior coming from when you take some code that comes from Windows and you run it on Uno, it's supposed to be doing the same thing. And if it does not, then that's not the right way to go. So that's something that we're going to be taking a look. And I'm assuming that once WinUI 3 gets open sourced, a lot more of you are going to be able to do that kind of migration from the source that's coming from WinUI over to Uno, and the stability of the platform is going to improve. Okay, getting lots better. So let's take a look at the load. Okay, so you see, I probably still have another version of Visual Studio that's taking some memory, but I don't know which one that is. Yeah, almost 6 gigs of memory, so that's pretty large. I don't know why it's that large, but anyways. So that's why you probably need a machine that has a bit of memory when you're doing things like that with when you're actually building something with Uno. Not building an application. So if you're building an application, you're not going to have that kind of problems. But when you're running and building for the Uno solution itself, you need a machine that has that has at least 16 gigs of memory, because otherwise you're gonna get into trouble, because Visual Studio is gonna eat it up very quickly, and it's gonna get unstable. Okay, there we go. So let's see if the Search Explorer is gonna help me this time. Yep, it looks like it's gonna do something. I know that the Visual Studio team has been working on making sure that everything is put out of process, and that freezes like those don't happen. And they're on a very long journey of making everything out of process so that that Visual Studio doesn't freeze anymore. I'm eagerly waiting for that time. Okay, so you can see here that the test is running and it's green. Good. Okay, so the changes that I made here actually fixed it, so the selected index became 1 instead of staying 0. So let's do a second validation just to make sure. Select the second one again and see that if it actually does what it's supposed to be doing, but it should be. Yeah, 64-bit version of VS. In France, in French, in France we say l'Arlésienne, which is something that people talk about, expect to be, but never happens. So it's something that that is going to be happening at some point. We don't know, but yeah, it would be nice if it were to happen. 64-bit versions of Visual Studio. Yeah, and then the ARM64 version as well. Yeah, well, if the 64-bit version of x86 version or x86 64 version happens to happen, to be built, then the ARM64 version is going to happen after. I'm assuming you have you have an ARM tablet, Jeremy, right? So it works. So we have the second test that was added there. So we're setting the selected index to different versions, and then selected item into different versions, and it works. So let's make it work the other way around and see if that works properly. So if I do set selected index, and then I do index to 1, then the items should be the same. So the selected item should be the first item, and if I set it to 0, it should go back to 0. So what I did here is I selected the scope of the class, so outside of the method, and then I'm using Control RT, which is basically running the tests for the scope of the file. So it's going to run all the tests in the file. So that's that. Yeah, you have Suppress Pro X. Nice, nice. I'm assuming Visual Studio already runs on this using the emulation layer. It's probably not as fast as it would be if it were an ARM64 version of it. Okay, so let's see if it runs properly. So it fails. It fails. So what does it fail? So let's go to the. So it's supposed to be. It's expecting selected item. So that's interesting. So it fails at the second one. So I'm checking for selected item. So accept. Oh, that's right. So that's a good one. So I forgot to change selected index, and so it actually set the 0 as the item. So yeah, that's not what I wanted. So let's do it again. And let's see if that works better. So that should be. And so that means that we're going to have fixed that one specifically. So what we're going to do afterwards is validate that it does work properly using the end result. So to do that, what we're going to do is go back to, so change the scope of that Visual Studio that's running, and use a different target, which is going to be net standard 2 for running on Skia. So there we go. So we have that green check to make sure that everything works. So let's get out of that solution, and we're going to be opening another filter. So let's go to the folder view, and here in the cross-targeting override, we're going to go and open the net standard 2 version of it, and we're going to be opening the Skia build. So we're going to be building a new version of Skia. Oh, and I missed something, so I have to change that NuGet override version. I actually could probably use the same one. So 34306. So let's go to that one. So I'm going to be changing here in the file. It's called dev 306. So if I do this, I'm going to be using the same version that's going to be built by Visual Studio. So what I'm going to be doing here is just build the full application here. So we're going to just start a build at the top and see where that goes. So that should be giving the right thing. And that's that. So I hope this will have given you some good insights on how to make modifications inside of Uno, using a simple task that is there. And you can see that there are some things that some things that need to be known, like running unit tests, or running on separate applications like this for the applications to be easily compiled, or using solution filters so that you're not spending time and you break Visual Studio because the Uno solution is too large and it cannot build the whole thing properly. So so that's one of the things to know when building for Uno. So that's it. It's building properly. So next week, I'm probably going to be doing some other very similar things, taking some issues that are that have been opened and take a look at how we can fix them, or investigate how we can adjust all this and see what we can do with it. In many cases, it's simple bugs. Like this one, for instance, if it's not setting the selected index properly, you can just dive into and and make it work quite quickly. The important part is to make sure that you have unit tests running and UI tests. In some cases, unit tests are better because they build faster and are easier to troubleshoot. But if not, runtime tests do work as well. We have a set of unit tests that are called runtime tests, and those tests are running inside of the environment of the target. So it's really testing the exact same behavior using the proper runtime. Where the unit tests here are running using net 461 for now. That will change in the future, but for now that's what it is. Okay, so I have built the new one, and probably if I can go here and go back to my selected index here, if I rebuild, we'll see that it'll probably have something that does work. So let's see, it doesn't work. So it means that we're probably not using the right version of Uno. Let's see. To determine if it's the right one, you can just go and navigate to something else. So let's say we go to GTK and F12 to something else. So is it the right one? We're using netcore app 3.3.3.1, which is a bit odd. It's probably not the right one. Yes, so that's one of the issues that we need to fix. So the reason it doesn't work is that we have when we do an override, sometimes it does override a bit too large. So that means that that one is probably not doing the uno.ui.dll is not supposed to be in that folder. So it actually overrides a bit too much. So what we're going to do for now is just go into that folder and remove the files that are not supposed to be there. And it's something that we're going to be fixing probably in another live stream if we have the time, or another one. So in that specific folder here, it's uno.ui.runtime.gtk, cia.gtk. It's only that file that should be there, and all the others are not supposed to be. So let's take those out. Let's take a look here, GTK. So let's dump those ones. We're probably going to be needing to do a full restore because NuGet is going to be trying to keep references to those files which are not supposed to be here. So one good trick to know what you're building for is go to the proper target, go to the page or some symbol that's in the assembly that you think is in, and if you go to F12 and do it again, see here now the target is actually the right one. So it's actually not the right one because it's 304, but we're going to change that. But the idea is that it's now using 304 and not the other version of the file that's not supposed to be here. Yes, build calc. I'm not gonna stop doing that kind of things. It's probably gonna be refined at some point. You're probably doing maybe having some more you're kind of balancing the depth of the type of work that's done during the streams. Today it was a bit lighter. It went up to chain last week. Last time it was deep inside of Xbind, but it's now it's going up the stack. So we can see here that the restoration was not the right one. It's probably because of that one. So let's take a look at that one and restore it. So the reason it took the other one is that 340 is stable and that one is unstable, is pre-release. So because that package has a reference to version 340, it overrides the fact that this one should be a development version. So that's one thing to do. So you have to align both. So let's rebuild that and see now if we're having the right DLL. And let's see if we go to page again, do we have the right DLL being loaded? It's taking more time, which is good. Probably not using the cached one. During that, Navio, you changed to the Microsoft UI example control navigation view, not changing the selection. Okay, so yes, so if it still works, that's good. But if it doesn't do the right thing with the selection indicator, that means that it's probably something else that we need to fix. And I remember that Martin Zickman is looking at something like that. You can take a look at the issues in the Uno platform, and I think we have. So there's that. So there's multiple issues with selection. So see, there's a navigation view does not select first item navigation view, and there's also that one selection indicator does not move to settings item. So it's probably related. So you can follow those two issues, and if it's actually not that, don't hesitate to put another one so we can track it and take a look. So let's see. See, now it's using the right one. So it's using 340 devs 306, which is the one that's supposed to be there. So if I run the application again, does it work now? Yes, it works. So licenses is the second item to be selected, and it does work properly. So the other thing that we may want to take a look at is to make sure that it actually also works if we set it directly inside of the main page and not inside of the constructor and not in the loaded. So let's take a look at that as well. And that should be good. Let's see. Nope, it doesn't work. Okay, so that means that there's another issue. So if we set the selected item inside of the constructor, it doesn't work, but it actually does work in the loaded. So that's something that we're going to be taking a look maybe next week, so we can find out what happens. If not, it's probably going to be another issue because it's something that should work properly. So that's it. That's it for today. That was some little dive into the features of Uno and how to debug and take a PR and take an issue and try to fix it and see where that happens. So if you have any questions, drop by our Discord and ask us questions. So we are happy to help and help you get started into contributing to Uno or using Uno for that matter. Both are equally good. And let us know what you think. So until next week, have fun doing some Uno or general development. Bye-bye.